So if you're like me and you love recording live drums, but you're not getting the results that you want, this video is for you. Okay, so 20 years ago, I was probably in a similar situation to the one you're either in or you have been. I was a drummer, I was in a band, I was trying to figure out how to record my band. So I started going down the path of getting gear. I got microphones and cables and the 10-pack of stands. So I started pointing microphones in directions. And the first thing that I realized after recording my drums in my bonus room of my mom's house was, this does not sound like Nickelback. At the time, as a teenager at home with no experience, I thought what I needed to do was learn how to mix really well. And if I just knew how to mix the drums, that would solve all my problems. I was wrong about that. In some sense, mixing would be helpful to the process, but what I was overlooking was the thing that I was actually doing that I had control of. I was just lacking experience in. It was the capture. The capture is everything. It is the performance, it is the drums, it is the microphones, it is how you record, it is how you make decisions and everything leading up and everything that you actually record, of course. What I wound up doing was moving to Los Angeles once I figured out this was like a job that you could have. Went to a trade school, and it was there that I learned a crucially important lesson, and that was on phase. What is phase? Phase is a little bit of a complicated topic, but the long and short of it is, if you're recording a single source, let's call it a snare drum, and you're using multiple mics like a close mic and overheads and a bottom mic, what's going to happen is if your mics are not in phase with each other, then it's gonna sound really thin and not pleasant. When you understand how phase works and you learn when to reverse it and how to check and how to account for it, you get that big, fat, juicy drum sound that you are looking for. Now, I'm not gonna go into the weeds about the waveform, amplitude, frequency, and what happens when they're out of phase, but if you want a video on that, let me know down in the comments. Also, we're making a full-on drum recording course, so if you're interested in that, check the link in the description for that. Let's listen to an example of a drum performance where the snare is out of phase, and then we're gonna reverse the phase of the overheads, and you're gonna hear it in. Listen to the difference that it makes. So you hear all that body in the snare when the mics are in phase with each other. Learning about phase made the biggest difference for me as someone recording the drums and playing the drums right away. Next, what we're gonna talk about is the most obvious thing, but to me, for some reason, it was not. The source. Let's talk about that. So after I finished recording school, I started working at a huge recording studio in Los Angeles. The studio is called East West Studios, a historic old Sinatra studio from the 60s, but is one of the most famous and prolific places to actually record your record. They had between 4 and 5 different studios in this place, and each tracking room has a completely different sound. Working there, I was a studio assistant engineer, which meant I was the staff liaison to whoever the clients were. I was the guy who knew the rooms. I did a session with a drummer named Vinny Caliuta, who is one of the most successful drummers. Guys like that typically have a drum tech who show up before the session. They bring all of their drums, all of their extra drums, they set everything up for them, everything's tuned and ready to go, and all their other drums are off to the side, also tuned and ready to go before the drummer even arrives. During that time, I, the studio assistant, am setting up the microphones for the session. I'm placing them, and I am testing the lines to make sure that this signal works and that everything comes through and sounds good before the client gets there. I remember this moment really resonated with me. We just had 421s on the toms. The drum tech was sitting at the drums, and he was hitting the different drums so that I could test the lines. And I remember unmuting the toms on the drum kit and listening and getting the levels, looking at the input, and just hearing the sound. I thought to myself, that sounds like the sound I'm going for. The sound I've always wanted, it just sounds that way. I haven't done anything to it. Nothing has, no tricks have happened. There's no mix. He's literally just hitting the tom and it sounds like a finished, incredible record. That was the moment that I realized it's the source, it's the drum. That tom just sounds like that. That kick drum just sounds like that. I realized I need to learn everything I can about the source. The more you learn about the thing you're recording, the more leverage you have on making it sound the way that you want. If you can make that drum sound how you want it to sound at the drum, when you put your mics on it, it's gonna sound that way. In addition to learning about the drum itself and what makes the drum sound, how it sounds, and how you can use it to your advantage, learning about how you can manipulate the drum with additional tools like these can drastically change the results that you can get almost immediately. A couple different things that you can do at the source that can really determine what the end results you're gonna get are. Well, number one is you can change the source. Sometimes that drum you're using just ain't the right drum for that gig, for that song. It could be the best drum in the world, but it could be wrong for that song. Knowing when you should just take the drum and try a different one is a huge benefit. As a drummer who had usually 2 or 3 snares at any given time, sometimes switching the drum was the last thing I would think. I would sit there and tune the drum a bunch and try to find the right thing, when the fastest and most immediate change I could get was literally a different drum that sounded different. One of the second things is once you find something that feels a lot closer to what you're looking for, is then being able to modify the sound of that drum. And sometimes all it takes is just a little bit of adjustment on the pitch of the drum. Sometimes the pitch just needs to come up a little bit or come down a little bit. Just the tiniest little change that can bring it right into the song. Another thing that you can do as a quick change is you can adjust the tension of the snare wires. The snare wires and how tight or how loose they are can really affect the feeling of that drum performance, especially depending on the tempo. Thinking to have a quick adjustment of, hey, can you pitch that up just a little bit? Never mind, can you bring it back down a little bit? Can you try tightening the snare? These types of notes can make a very huge difference in a very short amount of time. If you're an audio engineer, it's good to think, to ask, to try these things, because it makes such a big difference in the end and the impact of the emotion of the song. Outside of those two things, one of the other things you can try is to actually dampen the resonance of that drum, or choke it out a little bit, or open it up a little bit. A lot of drummers have different ways of going about this, from putting bandanas or towels or wallets on top of the drum, but these are things that you can try both to the snare and to the toms that make an enormous difference in how those drums are going to translate within the song itself. Which brings me to the next lesson that I learned, which was the performance and the performer. Now, the performance is the thing that we're actually listening to. The drum sounds are a huge component of it, but the performance and the interaction of how the drummer is hitting those drums actually completely changes how those drums sound. Sometimes a song can require a drummer to play the drums a little bit harder to have the impact come through and have it be appropriate for the genre and the emotion of that moment in the song. And sometimes the song requires the drummer to play very lightly. So if you're the audio engineer or producer and you're listening to this drummer, paying attention to how the performer is hitting the drums, how hard they are, and then adjusting your level for that. And then sometimes you just gotta ask them, hey, you know what? Lay back a little bit on the drums. Don't hit so hard. I think that our sounds are gonna make it sound even bigger. Communicating that with the drummer can do all of that work for you. So later when you're in the mix and you're just trying to cover up how thin the drum sounds because they were hit way too hard with a bunch of samples, you don't have to do any of that because the performance just sounds great. Anything you do in the mix is just gonna elevate what you have captured. Conversely, if the drummer is hitting a lot harder, then you're gonna wanna account for that, because sometimes that is what the song calls for, especially if it's more of a rock track and it's trying to cut through a bunch of layers of guitars. Sometimes that aggression is what matches the emotion of the song. So all of that would fall under like performance and performer. You as the person who is recording this need to be a participant in paying attention to these different things that are happening with the performer, performance, and the part to make sure you're getting the best possible results for the song, which in the end, by the time you get to mix, makes your job infinitely easy. And that's ultimately how you get the sounds that you want, is right at the start. The other thing that I learned over the span of my time at East West was about the capture. Specifically, what I mean is how the environment that you record in changes the emotion, the feel, the results of what you're recording, how the tools that you use on the source, microphones, preamps, outboard compression, and then placement, all of those things had a huge impact on how you actually got the results that you wanted. Let's start with the thing which was definitely not on my radar when I was recording at Mom's, which was the room itself.
We are here at East West Studios.
At East West, there are 3 primary tracking rooms that you can book, and each one of these rooms is a completely different room. I mean, it's different in looks, shape, sound. It is different materials. Everything about it is vastly different. Studio 3 is the smallest room of the 3 tracking rooms. There's no booths, anything. All the performers have to be in the same room. Now, sometimes when you record drums in a smaller space, there's this weird effect where they can actually sound bigger. What I learned is, like, the bigger the room, the more room sound you got, the roomier effect, the more play that the room has on that recording. So the room sound, the room size, the quality, ceiling height, how much stuff is in that room plays a massive role on how the drum sounds. For instance, here's a couple of examples of drums being recorded in very different rooms, and you can hear right away how that room impacts the sound of the recording. The next thing was microphones. Now, microphones can have different qualities depending on the type of microphone that you pick, but they can also have an effect on the recording in the quantity of microphones that you use. Historically, fewer microphones were used on drums just because of limited resources. And as resources became more plentiful, we had more tracks, we had more of everything, we had the ability to use a lot more microphones. Now, sometimes people on sessions would come in and send me a mic list of 18 mics, 20 mics, like Metallica. Multiple sets of overheads, multiple sets of rooms, double mic'd toms, double mic'd snares, things like that. And it was a lot. Now, that doesn't always mean it's going to be better, but what it can mean, especially when you're spending a lot of money going into a commercial studio, is you have more options for sounds. One of the records I did called 13 Voices with Sum 41, we used a bunch. I think we used 20 microphones. There were 3 different stereo sets of room mics. That's how important the room sound was. And Derek, who is the singer of that band, has his own incredible studio, where he told me on the session, he goes, I have pretty much all of this stuff. What I don't have is this room. That was like the reason he was booking that studio, was that room sound is one of a kind, and all those Sum 41 records, the drums were done in there. So he came there just for that particular thing, but we used a bunch of different room mics, and it wasn't because he needed all of them for the drums to sound a particular way. It was because you would pick one set of rooms depending on the song. You would have far room options, you would have really close room options, and then you're gonna get different behaviors from those mics based on the placement of them relative to the drums in the room. And again, I'm making a full drum recording course, so if you're like really wanna go down the rabbit hole on this stuff, sign up for that drum recording course waitlist. There's some cool resources that are free if you wanna check those out, and then I can notify you when the course is done. Without going too deep into it, the way I think about picking microphones, sometimes you can get a really full picture with just a few mics, like one solid overhead, one solid microphone in front of the kick drum, and then a microphone out as a far room. You can get a really beautiful and cool sound, especially if the drums and the source are dialed and you have a good player. But what you get when you start adding extra mics is more detail. If someone's playing a part and you're using those 3 mics I listed, you're not gonna be able to control how much hi-hat you get, right? So if you have a hi-hat mic and you need a little more articulation, and detail on the hi-hat sound or performance, you can pull that microphone up, right? So you can add in these extra microphones to emphasize more details. So the room was a huge part of the capture. The microphone selection, quantity, choice, placement, all play a pivotal role in the capturing of that source. And the last thing I'll just say on the capture that was totally off my radar is the equipment that you use, the microphone preamps. The preamp adds a character and a color to the signal that you're capturing, and you can use that as a tool itself. It's not 100% necessary. If you're just technically trying to record drums, you just need preamps. But if you are looking to change a certain character or quality of them, or have the behavior of the mic preamp be different, there's a lot of different preamp options out there that do all sorts of different special things with how they interact with the signal. If you have not noticed, none of the things I have mentioned in this video are mixing. Okay, so everything that I've mentioned so far probably played the biggest role in actually capturing and getting the sounds that I was looking for and wanted, like the different results that I wanted in recording drums. And honorable mention, drum selection, cymbal selection, the things that you're actually hitting that make the noise, even the freaking drumstick, the material at the tip of the drumstick, literally everything that contributes to the sound makes a difference. But post-recording, I do want to do one little honorable mention on something that was also off of my radar. We're going to cover just a tiny bit on it. It's called the edit. Andrew, this is why all the records that come out today have no soul and are terrible, is they edit everything out of it, everything that's good. Here's what I'm gonna say. The edit is a part of the engineering process. Taking a performance, and as the engineer, you are making technical decisions that are going to contribute to the end result as far as the sound of the performance. When you're editing, you can edit a comp. Most sessions are gonna have a comp. A comp is just gonna be, you do 5-6 takes on your part, you go through part by part and you pick the best performance of that part and you compile them together into one comp, right? That is technically an edit. I didn't know what a comp was. That layer of editing was very informative for me as far as making records and getting the sounds, instead of just playing it all the way through, being like, well, I didn't do very good here. Well, we'll just, you know, I messed up on that part, but it's okay. It's like, well, you can comp that part. The next part of editing that was really enlightening to see was time correction. I was working at the top of the top studios with the highest paid, most talented musicians, artists, bands, and you know what would happen is all their parts would be edited 100%. If it was a rock band, if it was a metal, prog, blues, whatever, are gonna have a lot of time correction in the performances. I can tell you as the assistant engineer on those sessions that we were editing it, and a lot of times I was the one who was editing it. It was a lot of work, but it was very informative and enlightening to watch us do everything we could to get the perfect, absolute perfect capture and sounds and selection and everything, and still go in and just improve the performance. Not really changing it, because most of the drummers were great. This was just locking things together, and this is, let's just call it a modern sound. This is how it's been for 20 years. It's not even uncommon at all. It's, if you think that not editing the drums is what you need to do, then do that. But as someone who works in the service business, as a musician and as an engineer and performer, you need to know how to do that, and you need to know what that does, and you need to be able to do it fast. And then outside that, the last bit on editing is just using editing as a gate. What I will do with the edit is I will select a section of a clip of a track we've recorded, let's call it a hi-hat. If we're doing a bridge where there's cymbals, the hi-hat is not being played, I will select that hi-hat and I will delete it. That editing cleans up the signal and is just giving us the signal of what we're hearing, right? So if someone's riding crashes and snares and kicks, but they're not hitting toms, those toms are gonna be rumbling. So just cleaning up those tracks in the edit gives you a better, cleaner result. That's it. Let me know what you think and what you like to do down in the comments of this video. There's a lot of other things that go into drum recording, but those things made the biggest impact on me and how I get the sounds that I get today that I love getting. It gets you right up to that finish line. You know, mixing should be fun. If you're not having fun when you're mixing, I like to call that fixing, and no one has fun fixing in the mix process. It is not what it's about. Again, let me know what you think down in the comments. Please do me a favor, if you like these videos, hit the subscribe button, go to the description of this video, join the waitlist for the drum recording course that we're going to be releasing sometime this summer. I'm trying to put a lot into it so you get as much value as you can. So sign up for that waitlist. Also, if you're looking to get some microphones or you're starting your own drum recording adventure and you're curious what drums I use or what recording equipment I use, check out the gear list in the description. Those will take you to Sweetwater. I've made these wish lists that have pretty much all the stuff that I use in my studio now, as well as stuff that I've used along the way. They're sponsoring this video, and it's a great place where you can get not only pro audio recording gear, microphones, cables, stands, all that stuff, but also the drums and cymbals themselves, the tools that I use to manipulate the drums, to tune the drums. Tried my best to compile them in an organized, coherent way into those lists. Go check that stuff out. Also, if you need some new studio mugs or fun studio shirts, check out the merch. There's merch down there now. All right, we'll see you guys in the next one.